Evelyn Hart never imagined her life would spiral into such darkness. Her father's labored breaths echoed through the thin walls of their small apartment, and each hospital bill pinned to the fridge felt like a noose tightening around her neck. Once a nurse with dreams of opening her own clinic, she was now drowning in despair, balancing two part-time jobs, skipped meals, and endless worry, while the flickering light above her head reminded her daily of how far they had fallen. The night was cold, bitter even, when her phone rang from an unknown number, and on the other end was a woman whose voice reeked of elegance and control, Victoria Wolf, the infamous stepmother of billionaire Landon Wolf. Victoria didn't ask. She offered $1 billion gift in exchange for a one-year marriage contract to her stepson, who hadn't been seen publicly since a mysterious accident had left him paralyzed. Evelyn thought it was a prank at first, but when she Googled the name, the magnitude of what was unfolding hit her like a storm. Landon Wolf, once hailed as the sharpest mind in the tech world, had disappeared after an alleged car crash 2 years ago, leaving behind a silence that invited rumors and tragedy. Evelyn was given no time to process, no moment to breathe, just a sleek black car sent to her home and a non-disclosure agreement that made her hands tremble as she signed it, tears blurring her vision not out of joy, but exhaustion and fear. Her father, unaware, smiled weakly at her that morning, calling her his brave girl, while Evelyn silently promised herself she would do anything, anything to keep him alive. As she stepped into the towering Wolf estate, the world changed. Polished marble floors, grand chandeliers, staff with eyes like shadows, and silence that swallowed her heartbeat. Victoria greeted her like a queen greeting a pawn, her smile sharp, her handshake colder than glass. And though Evelyn wanted to turn around and run, she remembered the bill that was due in 3 days and the look of peace on her father's face when she told him everything would be okay. She signed the contract with fingers that shook, knowing that she wasn't just signing away her name, she was surrendering her freedom, her identity, and possibly her heart. When the double doors to Landon's private wing creaked open, Evelyn felt her breath hitch. There he was, seated in a sleek wheelchair, back to the window, face carved with silence, and eyes that stared straight through her like she didn't exist. Landon Wolf was handsome, yes, painfully so, but there was something else. Something haunting in the way he refused to speak, how his jaw clenched when she stepped closer, and how his fingers twitched just once before falling still again. He didn't greet her, didn't nod, didn't blink. Instead, he exhaled sharply and muttered, "Let's just get this over with," as if her presence was another burden added to his already ruined world. Evelyn stood there, heart pounding, unsure whether to cry or scream, and instead offered a small, sincere smile, because that's all she had left. Over the next few hours, she was briefed by assistants who acted more like guards, given a list of expectations that included public appearances, red carpet events, and, most strangely, Sunday morning breakfast with Landon, even if he didn't speak a word. Evelyn nodded through it all, pretending to understand, pretending to be strong, but inside she was splintering. That night she sat alone in the lavish guest room, meant to be hers for a year, staring at a portrait of Landon from years ago, standing tall, confident, and almost arrogant, his blue eyes sparkling with ambition, so different from the ghost she had met earlier. She wondered what had broken him so completely, what had turned the man of steel into one of silence, and more importantly, why someone as cold as Victoria would hand a stranger $1 billion just to marry him. Evelyn knew there were layers here, lies buried under luxury, pain dressed in diamonds, and yet she also knew she had already jumped off the ledge. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she stood by the window and whispered to herself, "Just 1 year." But deep down, something told her this deal was more than a lifeline. It was a storm she couldn't outrun, a fire she would either emerge from reborn or reduced to ash. Moving fully into the imposing Wolf mansion felt like stepping into a battlefield where every glance and whisper was a weapon aimed at Evelyn, a stark reminder that she was an outsider in a world woven with secrets and power plays. The staff barely concealed their disdain, and the cold, calculating eyes of Victoria followed Evelyn relentlessly, each interaction layered with thinly veiled venom designed to chip away at her resolve. Yet no hostility cut deeper than the unbearable silence emanating from Landon Wolf himself, a silence so dense and suffocating that it echoed louder than any shouted insult. In the beginning, his frozen gaze avoided hers, and his unspoken words felt like walls built from pain and bitterness, crafted to keep her at bay. But Evelyn, despite the biting coldness and the ghost of grief that surrounded him, chose to see beyond the paralysis and the shattered facade. She refused to treat him like a fragile patient defined by his injury. Instead, she spoke to him as the brilliant, ambitious man he once was, the man who had conquered the business world with a single-minded passion. With gentle persistence, she peeled away the layers of resentment, sharing moments that shimmered with fragile humanity. The occasional soft smile, the rare laugh that escaped him unexpectedly, trembling and fragile as if it were the first light of dawn after a long, brutal night. That laugh terrified Landon more than his condition ever could, because it hinted at a hope he thought lost, and it scared him to confront feelings he had buried beneath years of silence and anger. Behind closed doors, Evelyn's curiosity and compassion drove her into late nights researching the latest breakthroughs in nerve therapy and stem cell treatments. Connecting with doctors and specialists who saw miracles in the making, she became his secret advocate, fighting a silent war against time and doubt, armed with nothing but faith and fierce determination. But their fragile bond was a threat, an unspoken challenge to the carefully constructed power dynamics of the Wolf Empire. Victoria, the ruthless matriarch with a heart as cold as marble, saw Evelyn's growing influence over Landon as a dangerous disruption to her control and inheritance plans. Her attempts to manipulate Landon became more aggressive, whispers in his ear, orchestrated visits from opportunistic business partners, and veiled threats meant to crush any spark of independence. Yet something astonishing happened. Landon, for the first time in years, resisted. The man who once bent to every command now stood quietly defiant, his silence transformed into a shield that no longer broke under pressure. This unexpected resilience unsettled Victoria, fueling her hatred and desperation, but it also revealed the power of Evelyn's presence. Her kindness and unyielding belief in Landon's strength were slowly but surely rewriting the story of his life. The mansion, once a place of cold calculation and lonely despair, began to feel warmer, filled with tentative moments of connection and unspoken promises. Though Landon remained guarded, a glimmer of the man he once was flickered in his eyes, hinting at a future that, despite the darkness, might hold redemption, healing, and perhaps even love. Evelyn, standing in the quiet between them, understood that this journey was far from simple, that battles would come not just from outside forces, but from the wounds within Landon himself. But she was ready to fight not only for the billionaire she was bound to by contract, but for the man she was starting to see beneath the paralysis and pain. In the silence of the grand mansion, between whispered resentments and fragile hope, a new story was beginning to unfold, a story of courage, trust, and the delicate power of human connection in the face of overwhelming odds. The fragile warmth that had begun to blossom between Evelyn and Landon was shattered one quiet evening, when Landon finally broke through the fortress of silence that had encased him, his voice low and raw with a pain years in the making, revealing the secret he had locked away deep in his heart. The accident that left him paralyzed was no accident at all, but a calculated act of betrayal, a sinister sabotage designed to destroy everything he had built. The truth hit Evelyn like a crashing wave. This wasn't just about healing or companionship anymore. It was about justice, about unmasking the shadows lurking in the very heart of the empire she had been thrust into. Swearing to stand by Landon, to help him uncover the mystery that still threatened to unravel their fragile lives, Evelyn felt the weight of the darkness grow heavier, twisting the air around them with a sense of impending danger. Just as hope seemed to flicker through the gloom, a new figure emerged from the tangled web of Wolf Corporation's past. Dr. Grayson Reed, once Landon's closest friend and now his bitter rival, a man whose charm masked a ruthless hunger for power. His presence was unsettling, his smile was sharp, his words laced with a dangerous sweetness, and as he extended an offer to Evelyn, promising cutting-edge treatments and medical breakthroughs, His eyes lingered too long on her, sending a chill down Landon's spine that neither man could deny. Grayson's relationship with Victoria's niece only deepened the suspicion and rivalry, weaving a complicated dance of loyalty and deception that threatened to entangle them all in a game far more treacherous than Evelyn had imagined. The mansion's walls echoed with whispered conversations and stolen glances, as alliances shifted like quicksand, and Evelyn found herself caught in a storm of jealousy and mistrust that tested her every belief. As the truth about Landon's fall from grace surfaced, so too did the bitter rivalries that festered beneath the polished veneer of wealth and privilege, secrets clawing their way out of darkness, threatening to consume everything they touched. Yet amid the turmoil, Evelyn's feelings for Landon grew, subtle but undeniable, blurring the rigid lines between duty and desire, complicating a path already fraught with danger. She wrestled with the weight of her loyalty, torn between the mission she had vowed to fulfill and the man whose eyes now held her heart captive. Every whispered threat, every cold stare from Victoria, every calculating move by Grayson sharpened the stakes, and Evelyn realized that the battle for the Wolf legacy was as much a war of hearts as it was of power. Through sleepless nights and desperate days, she clung to the belief that love could still be their salvation, a fragile thread holding them both against the storms gathering on the horizon. But the deeper they dug into the past, the clearer it became that nothing in this gilded world was as it seemed. Betrayal was currency, and trust was a dangerous gamble. Evelyn's resolve hardened, her courage fueled by the raw, aching truth that the man in the wheelchair was more than a victim. He was a warrior, wounded but unbroken, and she was ready to stand beside him, even if it meant stepping into the darkest shadows herself. Their story was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming a stolen future, about unearthing buried truths and facing bitter rivals with unwavering hearts. As tension tightened around them like a noose, Evelyn and Landon prepared to fight, not just for a billion-dollar empire, but for a love that dared to bloom in the ruins of pain and deceit. Just as Evelyn and Landon began to build fragile bridges over the chasms of pain and betrayal, Victoria struck with a venomous fury that shattered everything they had painstakingly gathered. She orchestrated a merciless trap that sent shockwaves through the city and splattered Evelyn's name across every headline like a cruel scar. The world was told that Evelyn married Landon for a billion-dollar inheritance, that she was nothing but a calculating gold digger exploiting a broken man for wealth and status. The media frenzy erupted into a storm of hatred, the public's judgment harsh and unforgiving, their whispers and cruel accusations echoing in Evelyn's ears with unbearable weight. In the midst of the chaos, Landon, vulnerable and battered by years of pain, allowed the poison to seep into his heart, succumbing to doubt and humiliation as the lines between truth and deception blurred. The man who had once found solace in Evelyn's presence retreated into an icy fortress of silence once more, shutting her out with a coldness so absolute it froze her soul. The mansion, once filled with tentative hope, now felt like a prison of loneliness and despair, where even the walls seemed to whisper a betrayal. But beneath the swirling storm of lies, a hidden truth, buried and raw, waited to be revealed. The truth that Evelyn was not a stranger to Landon's world at all. Long before the contract, before the mansion and the billion-dollar deal, Evelyn had been the nurse at the very hospital where Landon had been admitted after his catastrophic accident. She had witnessed his suffering firsthand, the endless nights filled with agonizing screams, the quiet battles fought behind closed doors, the slow, heartbreaking decline of a man who refused to surrender. Unseen and unknown to Landon then, she had fallen in love with his spirit, his fierce determination to fight even when the world had turned its back on him. This revelation, however, was twisted by Victoria into another weapon of manipulation, painted as a cold strategy, a ploy to seduce and control rather than a quiet, unspoken love born from shared pain. The emotional blow cut deeper than any physical wound, breaking down the fragile trust Evelyn and Landon had built. In a moment of unbearable sorrow and exhaustion, Evelyn, feeling betrayed by the man she had grown to love and the world that refused to see her truth, walked away from the mansion, from the life she had only just begun to glimpse. The echo of her footsteps faded into the heavy silence, leaving behind only the soft creak of Landon's wheelchair, a haunting reminder of the heartbreak that now filled the empty halls. Both trapped in their own agony, they faced the cold reality that love alone might not be enough to heal wounds so deep, and the path ahead was shrouded in shadows of doubt and despair, with only the faintest glimmer of hope flickering somewhere beyond the darkness. Landon's world collapsed under the weight of his own regret, the bitter taste of betrayal swirling like a storm in his chest as he sat alone in the dim light of his study, replaying old security footage he'd long avoided. What he saw shattered the icy armor he'd wrapped around himself. A younger Evelyn, kneeling by his bedside in the sterile hospital room, her hands trembling as she whispered silent prayers for him, eyes shining with hope and a fierce, unyielding love that defied the despair surrounding them both. The image seared into his mind, breaking down walls built from pain and doubt, forcing him to confront the cruel truth that he had been blind to the woman who had never stopped caring for him, even when he was at his lowest. Desperation drove his trembling fingers to dial her number, but the silence on the other end stung deeper than any rejection. Her refusal to answer only magnified the chasm that had grown between them. Without thinking, without waiting for permission, Landon grabbed his crutches and pushed himself into the relentless rain, each drop soaking his clothes and blurring the lines between his physical pain and the ache inside his heart. When Evelyn finally opened her door, the sight of him, so vulnerable, soaked to the bone, leaning heavily on his crutches, knocked the breath out of her lungs. No words were needed. The raw truth in his eyes spoke volumes. Slowly he wheeled inside, the sound of rain pattering against the window, mixing with the fragile quiet between them. "I don't want the chair anymore," he whispered, his voice cracking like fragile glass. "I don't want the pain. I want you." Those simple words hung in the air, heavy with longing and the promise of something new, something tender. The night unfolded like a delicate dance. No rush, no urgency, just the warmth of trembling hands seeking each other in the dim light. Tear-streaked confessions spilling like a river finally freed from its dam, and soft kisses pressed gently to foreheads that said everything words could never express. It was a love built on healing, on acceptance, on the quiet strength found in simply being together through the darkest hours. In that small apartment, far from the world's harsh gaze, Landon and Evelyn found refuge, not in grand gestures or fiery passion, but in the silent, sacred moments where two broken souls began to mend. It was a night that changed everything, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, raw, and filled with the kind of love that didn't consume, but gently healed the wounds that time alone could never reach. The quiet strength that blossomed between Evelyn and Landon ignited a fierce determination within them both, a spark that pushed them beyond the walls of their fragile sanctuary and into the storm that awaited. Together, they began unraveling the tangled web of deceit that had nearly destroyed everything Landon once held dear, digging deeper into the shadows cast by those closest to him. Their late-night conversations turned into relentless investigations, poring over documents, security footage, and whispered secrets until the cold, harsh truth was undeniable. Victoria, Landon's calculating stepmother, and Dr. Grayson Reed, the charming but treacherous rival, were lovers bound by greed and cruelty, masterminds behind the cruel accident that had left Landon paralyzed. Their betrayal fueled by a hunger for power and control over the Wolf Empire. The revelation burned through Evelyn's veins with a mixture of fury and heartbreak, but Landon's newfound strength, inspired by her love, gave him the courage to face the vultures circling his life. The day of reckoning arrived like a tempest. The boardroom transformed into a battlefield where Landon, supported by Evelyn's unwavering presence, rose from his wheelchair with trembling legs, but a heart fierce and unyielding. Every eye fixed on the man who once seemed broken, now standing tall with a resolve that silenced the room. The moment crackled with electric intensity as he confronted Victoria and Grayson with the evidence that laid bare their venomous plot. The room held its breath as Landon's voice, though still raw, carried the weight of truth and justice, echoing through the cold walls and shattering the facade of loyalty Victoria had so carefully constructed. The confrontation was more than a corporate coup. It was a declaration of love, resilience, and the reclaiming of a stolen destiny. Video footage of the scene leaked instantly, flooding social media and news outlets, painting Landon as the CEO who stood up for love, a symbol of triumph over despair and betrayal. The public was captivated, rallying behind a man who dared to defy darkness with nothing but the strength of his spirit in the woman who refused to let him fall. Victoria's arrest was swift and merciless, her empire of lies crumbling as the truth spread like wildfire. While Grayson, cornered and exposed, vanished overseas, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and shattered trust. With the Wolves banished, Landon reclaimed Wolf Corporation with renewed vigor. The board unanimous in their declaration of Evelyn as the soul of the company, recognizing her bravery, wisdom, and unyielding loyalty that had helped breathe life back into the empire. Yet Evelyn, ever humble and grounded, declined the honor with quiet grace, her eyes shimmering with tears as she whispered, "I didn't do this for a crown. I did it for his courage," acknowledging the man who had fought his way back from the abyss, not just for the company, but for the love they had nurtured against all odds. In the aftermath, their bond deepened, forged in fire and tempered by shared pain and victory, proving that sometimes the fiercest battles lead to the purest triumphs of the heart. Months after the fall of Victoria and the chaos that nearly destroyed the Wolf legacy, a new light dawned quietly yet profoundly in the lives of Landon and Evelyn. The once cold and somber mansion, filled with whispers of betrayal and silence, now thrummed with the steady rhythm of hope and healing. The world outside had watched Landon's incredible journey, the man who had been confined to a wheelchair, bound by the weight of his body and the scars of treachery, rise not only as the rightful head of Wolf Corporation, but as a symbol of resilience and love's transformative power. On this crisp, sunlit afternoon, nestled in a secluded field bursting with white roses that swayed gently under the soft caress of the spring breeze, the scene was set for a moment that would forever etch itself into the hearts of those privileged enough to witness it. Landon Wolf, the handsome, blue-eyed young millionaire who had fought his way back from despair, stood tall and steady on feet that had once trembled with weakness. Every step he took was a declaration, a vow spoken not through words but through the strength in his stride, a vow to himself, to Evelyn, and to the future they were building together. Evelyn, radiant in a simple yet elegant dress that mirrored the purity of her spirit, watched him with eyes shimmering with tears of joy and love, her heart beating wildly in her chest as if it might burst from the sheer intensity of the moment. The bitter coldness and painful silence that had once defined their relationship had melted away, replaced by a warmth that bloomed like the roses around them. Delicate yet resilient, a love grown from the deepest roots of trust, pain, and unspoken promises kept. The gathering of friends, family, and those who had supported their arduous journey looked on in awe and admiration, witnessing not just a wedding, but the culmination of a story written in heartbreak and hope. Landon's journey had never been about money or status. It had always been about reclaiming his life and love from the shadows that sought to consume him. This day was a testament to that truth. As the ceremony unfolded, Landon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box that glimmered softly in the sunlight. The hush that fell over the crowd was palpable, every breath held captive by the significance of what was about to happen. This was not the lavish gift of billion-dollar riches that many might have expected from a man of his wealth and stature. No, this was something infinitely more meaningful, a key. When he opened the box and revealed it to Evelyn, her eyes widened with surprise, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the weight of what he was offering. This key was to a children's hospital, a sanctuary of hope, compassion, and healing that Landon had commissioned and built in her name. It was a tribute to the woman whose love had breathed life into his shattered soul, whose kindness and courage had sparked the fire of his recovery when all seemed lost. "Your heart cured more than my body, Evelyn. It revived me," he said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion, carrying a depth of feeling that no riches or grand gestures could ever match. In that moment, the entire world seemed to pause, hanging on the tenderness and truth in his words. the kind of love that transcended pain and betrayal to create something pure and everlasting. It was a love not bought or earned by power, but one forged in the crucible of shared trials and silent sacrifices, a love that healed wounds deeper than the eye could see. Their story had become a beacon of hope for all who doubted that love could survive even the darkest storms, a testament that when two souls unite with unwavering faith, they can conquer the impossible. The scene shifted to a montage of their lives after the wedding, a vivid tapestry woven with moments of joy, service, and growth. Landon, once trapped in the confines of his body, was now seen moving confidently, teaching and inspiring underprivileged children in the very hospital that bore Evelyn's name, a hospital that had become a haven for those who had nowhere else to turn. His laughter, once rare and fragile, echoed through the halls as he connected with the children, not just as a benefactor, but as a mentor and a friend, embodying the very resilience that had saved him. Evelyn, returning to the profession that had shaped her, embraced her role as a nurse once again, her hands gentle and sure as she cared for the sick and the forgotten. She moved through the hospital halls with purpose and compassion, driven by a heart that had been tempered by love and pain. Together, they formed a partnership built not on convenience or contract, but on genuine devotion and shared dreams. The world outside marveled at their transformation. From two wounded souls trapped by circumstance to two warriors united by a bond that had proven stronger than any adversity. Their love story rippled through society, inspiring countless others to believe in second chances, in the power of forgiveness, and in the strength found in vulnerability. More than just a romance, their journey was a lesson in courage, perseverance, and the beauty of healing when nurtured by empathy and loyalty. They proved that true love is not a fairy tale painted with ease and perfection, but a mosaic of moments, some painful, some joyous, that together create a masterpiece of human connection. Landon and Evelyn's legacy was no longer defined by the shadows cast by Victoria's betrayal or Grayson's treachery, but by the light they shone into the lives of those they touched. Their story was written in every smile of a child who found care and hope within the hospital's walls, in every grateful tear of a patient healed by Evelyn's hands, and in every quiet moment shared between them, where words were unnecessary because their hearts spoke volumes. As the sun set on that field of white roses, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Landon and Evelyn stood hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that together they had conquered their past and built a love that would endure beyond time. Their footsteps, once uncertain and burdened by pain, now echoed with confidence and promise, each step a reminder that love, in its truest form, is a journey of healing, sacrifice, and unbreakable hope. This was not just the end of their story, but the beginning of a new legacy, one where love was measured not in wealth or titles, but in the lives changed, the hearts healed, and the courage to keep walking forward no matter how difficult the path. Their love was the kind that would inspire generations, a testament that even in the darkest nights, dawn will come, and with it, the chance to rise, to love, and to live fully once more.